Okay friends, one of the first things we need to do is safely raise and support our vehicle so the suspension is hanging. Once you have the suspension hanging, we're going to remove our 5 21mm lug nuts. Let's get our wheel off of here. Now what I like to do is take one of my lug nuts, start it on here so it's going to hold the rotor up against the hub so it can't wobble around. The next thing we need to do is remove our axle nut. You're going to want a 12-point 30mm. Looks like this. If for some reason when you were trying to take this off, you noticed that it was just spinning, obviously that can be an issue if you're trying to use a ratchet. If that's the case, use a nice long pry bar, come along in between your studs, bring it down to the ground to hold it still. The next thing we need to do is spray between the hub and the axle itself, just so we can break this free. At this point, what you would want to do is use a nice hammer and give this a couple loving bonks. We're not going to be reusing the axle, obviously, because we're replacing it, so we don't have to worry about the threads. But essentially, just kind of push it so that it's nice and free. The next thing that we're going to need to do is get a little bit of slack from our brake hose here. You're going to find a mounting bolt right there. Once we remove this with our 14mm, we should have plenty of slack. Get that out of there. So now we need to follow our lower control arm, and we're going to find 3 mounting hardwares down under here. There's going to be 2 nuts and then 1 bolt. I'm going to start with the 2 nuts, and then I'll start loosening the bolt using a 17mm. What you're going to notice is it's going to start to separate. Be careful. Okay, here we go. Now let's take a nice pry bar, come through the bottom of the control arm in the slot, and we're just going to draw this down. Just be careful for the bar not to slide out. You don't want to pinch any fingers, but we're going to pull the ball joint out and slide it to the side. So now looking at your little splash shield here, if you were to come along in front of this area, you're going to find there's a little push clip. Let's go ahead and take that out of there. Okay, there it is. Now let's come into the wheel well, and you're going to see 2 10mm headed bolts. Remove the pair. Grab this, bring it down and out of the way. The next thing we're going to do is grab onto the caliper right here and push on the axle. We're going to try to separate these two. Once we have it started, grab the axle from the backside and pull it out of the knuckle itself. Now for a safety precaution, we're going to go ahead and tie this axle to the control arm so there's nowhere it can go, because after that, we need to actually pop the axle out of the transmission. Now we need to get the axle out of the transmission. To do that, you can do it one of 2 ways. Use a pry bar like this, and then come right up against any lip that you can grab onto and give it a couple loving bonks with a hammer. That's going to help pop it out of the transmission. Otherwise, what you could try to do, of course, is to use a nice long pry bar, assuming you have enough space underneath the vehicle, come in between, give it a little pry, and pop it right out of there. I'm just going to go with this punch because it's something that has a little less clearance. Okay, so it's starting to come out. That's a great thing. Something that I want to mention real quick is you want to make sure you have a collection bucket laying underneath here, down on the ground. There's going to be fluid that comes out of your transmission, and we want to make sure that we can recycle it. All right, let's continue getting this out of here. So now that we have that nice and loose, let's go ahead and get our safety strap off of here. Now we're just going to go ahead and give it a couple tugs, see if we can get it out of the transmission. There it is, friends. Okay, now that the axle's out of the transmission, we have a nice clear view of the seal. It's always a great idea to go ahead and replace the seal, partially because now's a great time, and secondly because you can't always see if there's an issue. If for some reason you don't have one, it's a great idea to make sure you clean it down and inspect it. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'm just going to wipe it down with a nice clean rag. You just want to be careful not to put too much pressure because, of course, there's a spring inside there and you don't want to damage it. Take a peek with a mirror, make sure everything's in good condition if you're not replacing it. Now it's going to be time to get our axle in here. We want to go ahead and slide it in so the splined area is going into the transmission. Try to make it as straight as possible as it goes in. I'm going to move the knuckle out of the way a little bit. You can try to push this in, but overall what works best is a nice rubber mallet on the very end. You definitely don't want to use a regular hammer because you don't want to chisel up those threads. Okay, so we just bottomed that out. I'm going to get underneath the vehicle, I'm going to double check to make sure it's completely bottomed out, and then we'll continue. Next, we're going to spray the splines on the axle with a little bit of copper never seize. So take your axle in one hand, go ahead and grab your knuckle, slide it aside, and then put this end into the bearing/knuckle area. Okay, that should start coming through. If it doesn't line up, just give it a little twist until it does. There we are. Let's take our pry bar. We can pull down on this. Line up your ball joint studs with the actual control arm itself. There we are. Start in your bolt and start the other two nuts, then we'll snug them up. Snug these up, starting with the bolt. Let's torque these to 66 foot-pounds. Now let's get our axle nut on here. We're just going to bottom this out, and then we'll torque it to 159 foot-pounds. Let's get our flex hose reattached. Make sure you get your mounting bolt in there. Make sure it's secure. Let's get this cover back here. Got 2 screws and 1 push clip from underneath. Okay, so we've got our little push clip. It's going to go through the first one and into the second plate here. Make sure that they're secure. You don't want this falling off. Now it's going to be time to go ahead and torque our axle nut. There's going to be a couple ways that you can go about doing that. The way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to put the wheel back on here, start all my lug nuts so they're bottomed out, and then when I get it back down on the ground so the wheel's just barely touching, I'll be able to torque the axle nut and the lug nuts at the same time. Otherwise, if you want to put a bar going through your lug studs, you'll be able to torque this when it's much lower to the ground. Now that we have the wheel on and we have it just barely touching the ground so it can't spin, we're going to torque our axle nut first. Like I said before, we're going to torque this to 159 foot-pounds. That's super important. We know it's torqued. There's something else that we need to do with it. If you look at the axle, you can see that there's a slot. If for some reason your slot isn't facing up, maybe it's facing down or over to the side, you could of course jack back up the vehicle and spin the wheel until it faces up. That's going to be the easiest way. Next, we'll take a punch and a hammer, and we're going to peen this nut over so it falls down into that slot. That's how we're going to lock the nut on there, and that's how you're going to be as safe as possible. So as you can tell, I have this pressed all the way down. The farther the better. You want it to basically touch up against the axle as much as possible and make it so there's no way that the nut can accidentally loosen up on its own. Let's move along to torquing these lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. Torqued. So now it's going to be time to fill the transmission fluid. If you come down along the driver's side of the transmission, right along here, you're going to see a fill plug. When you find the fill plug, make sure you slide your little collection bucket under there so we can make sure we recycle any fluid that may come out. Use your 24mm socket. Go ahead and remove that plug. And now we're going to fill it with 7590 gear oil. And I'm going to cut the tip just like this. So I have a nice little point that can go into that transmission. Now I'm going to put it down in there. As we fill it, we want to fill it up just till there's a small trickle of fluid coming out down into our collection bucket. Once it's done that, we know it's full. We'll go ahead and tighten it right up. See if I can get the right angle. There we are. Put it in there. Give it some nice squeezes. See if I can. All right, so as you can tell, I have a nice little trickle coming out. If yours is coming out faster than that, just wait until it comes to a trickle. Now it's time to make sure we clean our fill plug here. Go ahead and wipe it down. There should be a gasket right on it. If you want to replace it, it's probably a good idea. If you don't replace it, just kind of make sure it's clean and it's not damaged in any way. Okay, so I've got that snugged up by hand. Now I'm just going to use a nice short ratchet. Put it on here. And essentially, once it bottoms out, which is right there, I'm just going to give it a teeny bit more. And that's it. You don't want to go too much further than that. You don't want to strip out your transmission. Now let's clean up our mess, close the hood, and take it for a road test.